Imagine you are 30,000 feet over the North Atlantic.
Right.
It's the middle of the night, pitch black outside. And suddenly, like this unprecedented cascading mechanical emergency strikes the aircraft.
Oh, wow. Yeah, a total nightmare scenario.
Exactly. Just multiple systems failing in a sequence that no engineer ever even predicted.
Right.
Now, you might think the pilot sitting in the cockpit is legally bound to follow the airline's, meticulously drafted multi-million page rule book to try and save you.
I assume so, yeah.
But under European aviation law specifically, Regulation 11392/2018, that pilot actually has the absolute undeniable legal authority to just throw the entire rule book out the window.
Which is pretty wild to think about.
Right. Like if the sky is falling, the pilot can break any rule, violate any local regulation, and completely ignore standard operating procedures to keep that plane in the air.
It really is the ultimate paradox of modern aviation. I mean, we spend millions of dollars and just countless hours constructing what is arguably, the most complex, impenetrable fortress of legislation in human history, all to ensure safety.
Just a massive wall of rules.
Exactly. But at the very tip of that regulatory spear, the law officially recognizes its own limits.
Yeah.
It legally delegates the final decision to human instinct.
It's fascinating. So, welcome to another deep dive. Today, our mission is to make the invisible visible for you.
And there's a lot of invisible stuff up there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're looking at this massive, incredibly dense stack of aviation legalese. Specifically, Phil Croucher's exhaustive notes on aviation operations and procedures.
Which are incredibly detailed.
They really are. Because, when you walk down the jet bridge and take your seat, you're mostly just looking at the physical engineering.
The riveted wings, the massive bypass engines.
Right, the metal tube. But that metal is really only half the story.
Yeah, barely half.
You are actually stepping into a remarkably complex web of laws, certificates, and operational manuals that govern exactly, who's allowed to fly, how they prove they are safe, and what happens when things go wrong.
And we're going to navigate a very specific part of that regulatory framework today.
So we're decoding the alphabet soup.
Oh, so much alphabet soup. We are talking about ICAO, EASA, CAT, AOCs, all of it.
Right.
We're going to look at the massive chasm between global suggestions and regional, actual enforceable laws.
Because there's a huge difference there.
Huge. By the time we finish, you will understand the staggering administrative architecture required simply to, sell a single commercial plane ticket.
Let's start right at the foundational layer of this architecture.
Okay, let's do it.
I'm looking at these sources, and it seems like aviation law has a bit of a split personality.
How so?
Well, on one hand, we have this global entity, ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization.
Right.
And the notes mention their Annex 6, which covers operations, and Annex 18, which covers dangerous goods.
Yeah, the global baseline.
But then our sources just immediately pivot away from ICAO and focus almost entirely on the European system, EASA, the European Union Aviation Safety Agency.
They do, yeah.
Why the sudden shift? I mean, if flying is a global industry, why aren't we just relying on the global rules?
Because global rules, they basically lack localized teeth.
Okay, what do you mean by teeth?
Well, ICAO was essentially born out of the Chicago Convention in 1944.
Right.
When nations realized that civil aviation was just going to explode after the Second World War, and they needed a standardized way for planes to cross borders.
So they needed everyone on the same page.
Exactly. So ICAO writes the baseline standards, they dictate the fundamental physics and the baseline safety of flight.
Right.
But ICAO does not have a police force. They cannot ground an airline.
Oh, I see. So they are essentially the United Nations of the sky.
That's a perfect way to put it, actually.
They pass these broad resolutions that everyone generally agrees on, but they rely on individual nations to actually enforce them.
Precisely. And that is where regional bodies like EASA step in.
Right.
Because European airspace is incredibly dense, it's highly complex, and it crosses dozens of sovereign borders within a very small geographic area.
Right. You fly for an hour, you need to cross 3 countries.
Exactly. So EASA takes those broad ICAO standards, specifically Annex 6 regarding operations, and translates them into highly specific, legally binding regional legislation.
Making them actual laws.
Yes. The document we are dissecting today is Commission Regulation EU 965/2012, which governs air operations.
Okay.
And EASA doesn't just adopt ICAO's suggestions, they expand upon them aggressively.
Yeah. The notes mention EASA covers things completely unaddressed by ICAO, like The ramp inspections of foreign aircraft.
Yes, the SAFA Program Safety Assessment of Foreign Aircraft.
All right.
This is a perfect example of regional enforcement. If an airline from outside the European Union lands at, say, Charles de Gaulle in Paris,
Okay.
EASA regulations grant European inspectors the authority to actually board that aircraft right on the ramp.
Wait, really? Just walk right on?
Walk right on. They can audit their paperwork, check their safety equipment, and physically inspect the plane.
Wow.
And if the foreign aircraft fails to meet the safety standards, EASA can literally ban that airline from entering European airspace entirely.
That is a massive amount of jurisdictional power.
It's absolute power over their airspace, yeah.
So if we view EASA's regulation 965-2-12 as the, enforceable constitution of European skies,
Right.
how does a single piece of legislation cover everything from a massive international airline flying an Airbus A380 to a local operator flying a small medical evacuation helicopter?
It sounds impossible, right?
It really does. It seems impossible to apply one rule book to both.
Well, it would be impossible, which is why the architecture of this regulation is just a masterclass in compartmentalization.
Okay, break that down for me.
Regulation 965-201 is sliced into 5 distinct subject annexes.
Right.
And actually, a quick point of clarification for you listening, do not confuse these EASA annexes with the ICAO annexes we mentioned earlier.
Oh, good catch.
Yeah.
Yeah, the notes are very clear on that.
They are entirely separate structural divisions within European law.
Okay, so let's open up this European rulebook. Annex, it seems straightforward enough. It's entirely dedicated to definitions.
It is, and I know a glossary might sound super dry,
Yeah, that does.
but it is the absolute bedrock of legal enforcement. You cannot regulate a commercial flight or a complex motor-powered aircraft until you legally define the exact parameters of what those terms actually mean.
Right, because lawyers will exploit any loophole.
Exactly. Lawyers live and die by Annex 1.
Makes sense. But the real structural genius seems to begin with Annex 2 and Annex 3.
Yes.
The notes list Annex 2 as Part ARO authority requirements for operations.
Right.
And Annex 3 as Part ORO organization requirements for operations.
That's right.
So help me visualize the mechanism here. Why are these separated?
Think of it as a deliberate, legally mandated firewall.
Firewall.
Yeah. Annex 2, Part ARO, dictates exactly how the regulators, the national aviation authorities, like the DGAC in France or the LBA in Germany, how they must behave.
Oh, I see.
It tells the government inspectors what they are allowed to approve, how they must conduct oversight, and the specific administrative procedures they have to follow.
So it's essentially the rule book for the referees.
Exactly. The referees have rules too. Then, across the firewall, you have Annex 3, Part ORO.
Right.
This is the rulebook for the players. It dictates how an airline company structures its internal management, its responsibilities, and how it actually proves compliance to the authority.
Okay, so why the strict separation?
By separating them into different annexes, you prevent regulatory capture.
Right.
The airline cannot dictate how the authority inspects them, and the authority must operate within strictly defined legal boundaries when they conduct their audits.
So it forces a clean, transparent relationship between the regulator and the regulated.
Yes.
That makes total sense. So we have the dictionary in Annex 4, the referee rules in Annex 2, and the corporate structure rules in Annex 3.
Right.
But where is the actual flying?
Ah, the fun part.
Yeah. Where are the rules for putting passengers into a metal tube and accelerating down a runway?
That would be Annex 4th, universally known in the industry as Part CT, commercial air transport.
Part CAT.
This is the heaviest, most intensely scrutinized section of the entire regulation.
Because it deals with the paying public.
Exactly. Because it deals directly with unsuspecting passengers, it is massive, and it's further broken down into 4 distinct subparts.
Right, I'm looking at these subparts now, and they seem to cover the entire physical reality of a flight.
They do.
Subpart A is general requirements. Subpart B is operating procedures. Subpart C is performance and limitations.
Right.
I want to pause on Subpart C. When we talk about performance, we aren't talking about, financial performance, right? We are talking about physics.
We are talking about pure aerodynamic and thermodynamic physics, yeah. Translated into legal limits.
Yeah.
Wow.
Subpart C dictates how an aircraft must perform under specific weights, atmospheric conditions, and runway lengths.
So it changes depending on where you are.
Totally. Taking off from a short, hot runway in Athens in the middle of August requires drastically different engine performance and weight calculations than taking off from a long, freezing runway in Oslo in December.
Oh, absolutely. The air density is completely different.
Right. So Part CS Subpart C provides the legal framework ensuring that an airline mathematically proves their aircraft can safely complete the takeoff roll, clear all obstacles, and land safely under those specific physical conditions.
That is a staggering amount of math to just, legislate into existence.
It really is.
And then Subpart D covers instruments, data, and equipment. This dictates what actual hardware must be bolted into the aircraft to fly passengers legally.
Precisely. It mandates the minimum required equipment, from the advanced weather radar down to the exact number of first aid kits and fire extinguishers.
Okay, which leaves us with the final piece of the puzzle. Annex V, known as Part SPA specific approvals. Right, SPA.
The sources list things like performance-based navigation, RVSM, low visibility operations, dangerous goods, night vision goggles, and helicopter emergency medical services.
A lot of specialized stuff.
Yeah. Why extract all of this highly technical flying from Part CT and isolate it over here in Annex V?
Because of regulatory efficiency, honestly.
What?
Take performance-based navigation, or PBN. Historically, aircraft navigated by flying these zigzag routes from one ground-based radio beacon to the next.
Like connecting the dots.
Right, but PBN changes that. It allows an aircraft to use satellite navigation like GPS, combined with advanced onboard computers to fly highly precise curved flight paths that are totally independent of ground beacons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this saves massive amounts of fuel, reduces noise over cities, and allows air traffic control to safely pack more planes into the exact same amount of airspace.
That sounds like an incredible upgrade for the whole industry.
It is, but it completely shifts the regulatory burden.
How so?
Well, regulators can no longer just inspect a radio tower on the ground. Now they have to certify the complex internal computers of the aircraft and ensure the pilots are specifically trained to monitor that digital performance.
Oh, right. You can't just climb a tower and check an antenna anymore.
Exactly. And the same logic applies to RVSM reduced vertical separation minimum.
What's that?
Modern digital altimeters are so precise now that regulators realized aircraft could safely fly just 1,000 feet above each other instead of the historical 2,000 feet.
Wait, they just sliced the buffer in half?
Yeah, which effectively doubled the capacity of high-altitude airspace.
That's amazing. But not every plane has those modern digital altimeters or PBN capabilities, right?
Exactly, and that is the absolute brilliance of isolating them in Part SPA.
Oh, we get it.
A standard airline flying older aircraft doesn't have to carry the massive regulatory burden of proving they can execute a precision satellite approach or operate a helicopter with night vision goggles.
Right, because they aren't doing those things.
Right. You only seek a specific approval for the specialized modules you actually intend to use. It keeps the baseline commercial air transport rules clean and manageable.
I see the modularity. That's really smart. But our sources point out something truly surprising here.
What's that?
There are massive exemptions explicitly written into this framework.
Yes.
It states that Annexes the 3rd and 4D, the heavy corporate and passenger rules we just discussed, they do not apply to military operations, customs, police, search and rescue, parachute dropping, or firefighting.
Right.
There is even a hyper-specific carve-out for flights conducted immediately before or after aerial work, carrying no more than 6 indispensable persons.
Yeah, that's a very specific one.
Why build this impenetrable fortress of safety regulations only to leave the back door wide open for these specific groups?
It really comes down to the fundamental calculation of risk versus mission.
Okay.
Commercial air transport regulations are designed with a singular goal: to drive the risk to the ticket-buying public as close to absolute zero as physically possible. Passengers are unsuspecting, they do not consent to danger, but consider a firefighting operation.
Yeah, that's a totally different beast.
Exactly. The entire mission is to fly a heavily loaded aircraft low to the ground into turbulent, smoke-filled air over a blazing forest and dump tons of water.
That is inherently dangerous. There's no way to engineer that risk down to zero without simply refusing to fly.
Precisely. If a firefighting squadron or a Coast Guard search and rescue helicopter had to comply with the rigid performance limitations, instrument requirements, and crew rest periods of an airline flying tourist to Ibiza,
Right.
they would never be able to complete their missions. The red tape would literally ground them while forests burn or ships sank.
So how are they regulated then? It can't just be the Wild West out there.
No, it isn't the Wild West.
Mm-hmm.
The sources clarify that these specialized missions fall under national regulations, or they are governed by a broader clause in the basic regulation that demands operators have due regard for safety as far as practicable.
Due regard. Okay.
Yeah. The regulators acknowledge that the tactical, life-saving necessity of the mission fundamentally alters the acceptable risk profile.
Right.
They are exempt from EASA's commercial box because their reality just doesn't fit inside it.
That makes perfect sense. The rules bend for the mission.
Exactly.
But let's bring it back to the commercial box. If an airline is operating under Part CT, our sources introduce a major complication.
Oh, yeah.
Even within this massive rule book, not all laws carry the same weight. There is a deeply ingrained division between what is called hard law and soft law.
Right.
Why do we need two different types of laws to govern one airplane?
We need them because the machinery of government is fundamentally slower than the machinery of innovation.
Okay, that's a great way to frame it.
To govern a dynamic, high-tech industry safely, you have to split your regulations into the what and the how.
Let's analyze the what first.
Okay. The what is the hard law. In EASA terminology, these are referred to as the part CP or part ORO.
Right, the ones we just talked about.
Exactly. These are the fundamental rules, acts, and regulations debated and passed by the European Parliament and the Council.
Okay.
They are legally binding, they give an airline permission to operate, and they strictly dictate the ultimate safety objective.
Give me an example.
For instance, a piece of hard law will unequivocally state that a commercial passenger aircraft must be equipped with a reliable emergency evacuation system.
But because it is passed by politicians in a parliament, changing that hard law must be an agonizingly slow process.
Oh, it is a bureaucratic glacier.
Yeah.
It requires impact assessments, parliamentary debates, and multiple layers of multinational approval. It can take years to amend a single clause of hard law.
Wow.
Now, imagine a manufacturer invents a revolutionary new emergency evacuation slide using completely new composite materials and explosive deployment mechanisms.
Oh, I see where this is going. If the airline has to wait 3 years for the European Parliament to debate the safety of this new slide and update the hard law, the innovation just dies on the vine.
Exactly.
The technology outpaces the legislation.
Which brings us to the genius of soft law.
Okay.
To prevent this bottleneck, the system relies on acceptable means of compliance AMCs and certification specifications, or CS.
AMCs and CS.
Right. This is the soft law. It is generated by EASA's technical experts, not politicians. Soft law tells the industry how the hard law is to be achieved.
So if the hard law is a sign on the wall that says you must not starve,
Yeah.
the soft law is essentially a recipe book handed to you by the regulator.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it, yeah.
But here is the critical question. Do I have to follow the regulator's recipe exactly? Like, if they give me an AMC detailing how to design an evacuation slide, am I legally bound to use only those materials and testing methods?
You are not, and that is where the absolute flexibility lies.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Soft law does not have official binding legal standing in the same way hard law does. It is supplementary guidance. An AMC illustrates one pre-approved, guaranteed way to comply with the hard law. If an airline follows the AMC, if they use the exact recipe EASA provided, their compliance is automatically presumed.
They just get the green light.
Right. The authority will stamp their paperwork without hesitation.
But if they want to use that brand new revolutionary slide technology?
They can. They simply have to invent their own recipe.
Oh, wow.
The airline or manufacturer can present an alternative means of compliance to the National Aviation Authority.
Well, there's a catch.
Oh, big catch. The catch is that the burden of proof shifts entirely onto them. They must provide exhaustive data, testing, and engineering analysis to prove to the authority that their new method meets or exceeds the baseline safety requirement established by the hard law.
This is a remarkable system. It maintains the absolute safety baseline of the hard law while allowing the technical experts to rapidly update the soft law to keep pace with modern engineering.
It really is elegant.
I noticed the sources mention a numbering system for this, like CAT.OPS 100, for example.
Yes, that numbering format acts as a map for the industry.
Okay.
If a pilot or manager sees CAT.OPS 100, they know instantly they are looking at commercial air transport, the operations section, paragraph 100.
Oh, I see.
It allows them to navigate the vast architecture of hard law and find the corresponding soft law AMC that explains exactly how to comply with it.
So if you successfully navigate the hard law and follow the soft law recipes, the regulator grants you permission to operate.
Right.
But the ultimate goal for an airline isn't just flying. It's charging money for flying.
Naturally.
And the sources point out that the moment money changes hands, the regulatory environment shifts dramatically. You cross the threshold into commercial air transport.
You step into the big leagues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How exactly does the law define that threshold? Where's the line between a private flight and a commercial operation?
The line is drawn at Article 2 of Regulation 965-20112, and it hinges on two words: valuable consideration.
Valuable consideration.
Right. The regulation defines CA as an operation to transport passengers, cargo, or mail for remuneration or other valuable consideration.
Well, remuneration is easy. That is just buying a ticket with cash.
Right.
But valuable consideration sounds incredibly broad.
It is deliberately broad to prevent loopholes.
Okay.
The sources emphasize that valuable consideration means receiving something of money's worth, even if the value is purely nominal. It does not require a direct cash transaction.
Give me an example of that.
Well, the text provides a wonderfully absurd but legally accurate example.
Let's hear it.
Imagine a marketing campaign where consumers collect chocolate wrappers and mail them in to win a free flight.
Okay, like a contest.
Right. The passengers didn't buy a ticket, but the airline received those wrappers, which hold a nominal marketing value for the campaign.
Wait, receiving chocolate wrappers legally triggers a commercial air transport operation.
Yes. The transaction occurred. Value, however abstract, changed hands in exchange for transport. So the flight is commercial, and it is instantly subjected to the crushing weight of Annex Ahang, Part CRT.
Let me push this to its logical extreme, because I want to see how airtight this definition is.
Okay, go for it.
Say I hold a private pilot's license. I run a small plane, and I invite a friend to fly from London to Paris for the weekend.
Sounds lovely.
We share the cost of the fuel, we have a great time, and as a spontaneous thank you, my friend buys me a wildly expensive €1,000 dinner in Paris.
Nice.
Have I just committed illegal commercial air transport? Did that dinner constitute valuable consideration?
This is exactly the kind of nuance aviation lawyers dissect constantly.
Right.
In your specific scenario, you are likely protected under the rules for private flying, which are governed by Part NCO non-commercial operations with other than complex aircraft.
Okay, so I'm safe.
Probably. The key factors are intent and contract. Sharing direct operating costs like fuel is legally permissible. A spontaneous gift after the fact without any prior agreement does not constitute a contract for transport. However,
I knew there was a however.
if your friend said to you before the flight, "I need to get to Paris for a meeting, and if you fly me there, I will buy you a €1,000 dinner," you have established a quid pro quo.
Oh, I see.
You have exchanged transport for valuable consideration. You just crossed the line into CST, and if you do not hold the proper certification, you are operating an illegal charter.
And the required certification is the AOC, the Air Operator Certificate.
Yes, the AOC is the ultimate prize.
Right.
It is the golden ticket granted by the National Aviation Authority that legally permits an organization to charge money to carry people or freight. It must be renewed annually, and the scrutiny required to obtain and maintain it is just immense.
Let's explore that scrutiny.
Sure.
If an investment group decides they want to start a new commercial airline tomorrow, they buy some planes and apply for an AOC. What exactly is the gauntlet they have to run?
First, they must meet the strict geographical prerequisites. You cannot engage in regulatory shopping.
What do you mean by that?
You cannot hold an AOC from one authority but base your operations somewhere else to get lighter oversight.
Oh, I see.
EASA demands that your principal place of business, your registered corporate office, and your aircraft registry must all be located in the exact same member state where you are applying for the AOC.
Why are they so strict about the location?
Because oversight requires physical proximity and legal jurisdiction.
Right?
If an airline's management is in Germany, their planes are registered in Ireland, and they fly primarily out of Spain, auditing their safety culture becomes an absolute administrative nightmare.
Yeah, that sounds impossible to track.
Exactly. EASA wants the metal, the management, and the oversight perfectly aligned.
The sources mention a timeline. It says the application must be sent at least 6 weeks before the planned start of operations.
Yes.
That seems incredibly short for launching an airline. 6 weeks.
That is simply the absolute minimum legal filing deadline. In reality, the process of building the application takes months, often years, because when you apply for an AOC, you aren't just submitting a business plan or a bank statement. You are submitting human beings to the authority.
This is a fascinating part of the notes. ORO.AOC.135 details the requirement for nominated post holders.
Yes.
Who are these people?
To get an AOC, an airline must present a management organization featuring specific individuals who take personal legal responsibility for distinct areas of the operation.
Okay.
EASA requires named individuals for flight operations, crew training, ground operations, and maintenance.
So they aren't just hiring department heads, they're literally offering names to the government.
Exactly. And above all of these post holders sits the accountable manager.
Right, who is that?
This is usually the chief executive officer. The law mandates that this individual has the ultimate corporate authority to ensure that all operations are adequately financed and carried out to the safety standard demanded by the authority.
So the accountable manager cannot use the excuse, oh, I didn't know maintenance was cutting corners to save money.
They absolutely cannot. In fact, to prevent middle management from hiding safety flaws to protect budgets, the regulations require that the airline quality and compliance manager has direct, unimpeded access to the accountable manager.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the safety data must bypass the corporate hierarchy entirely and go straight to the person holding the legal liability.
It feels like the National Aviation Authority is demanding hostages.
That's a strong word, but yeah.
They don't just want a faceless corporate entity to sue if something goes wrong. They want specific, named professionals whose careers and potentially their freedom are on the line if the safety culture fails.
The term hostage really captures the gravity of the liability. You cannot hide behind a corporate shield in European aviation. These nominated post holders undergo intense scrutiny. The sources detail that they must possess deep practical experience, comprehensive knowledge of Part OPS, and, crucially, they must undergo a rigorous in-person interview with the authority before they are approved for the role.
Wait, a private company wants to hire a manager, but the government has to interview them first?
Yep.
That is intense. What kind of qualifications are we talking about here?
Take the nominated post holder for crew training, for example.
Yeah.
The regulations demand they are not just a desk-bound administrator.
Okay.
They must hold a current type rating instructor certificate, a TRI, for a type of aircraft the airline actually operates.
So they have to be able to fly the planes.
They must be an active, highly skilled, practicing expert in the exact machinery the airline uses.
These post holders are the architects of the airline. They hold liability.
They really do.
And because they hold that liability, I assume they are the ones tasked with writing the actual rulebook the pilots follow every single day. Which brings us to the airline's constitution, the operations manual.
Yes. The Operations Manual, or the OM, is the most vital document an airline possesses. It is submitted to the authority alongside the AOC application.
Right.
And this is a critical concept to grasp. EASA writes the abstract hard law, but the Operations Manual translates that hard law into actionable procedures.
Okay, I see.
Once the authority approves an airline's Operations Manual, that manual essentially becomes the law for that specific company.
Right, because a pilot sitting on the flight deck doesn't pull out European Commission Regulation 965-2012 to figure out how to start the engines in a snowstorm.
No, definitely not.
They pull out their company's operations manual.
Precisely. And because these manuals are thousands of pages long, they're rigidly structured into 4 distinct parts to ensure crews can find critical information instantly.
Okay, let's break them down.
Part A is general and basic.
Yeah.
This contains the overarching, non-type-related operational policies.
Like what?
It dictates the fundamental safety culture, the crew duty time limitations, reporting structures, and standard operating procedures that apply regardless of what specific airplane you are actually flying.
So Part A is the corporate philosophy and basic rules. What about Part B?
Part B is aircraft operating matters.
Yeah.
This is the intensely technical, machine-specific instruction.
Okay.
It contains the exact checklists, the performance graphs, and the systems descriptions for flying, say, a Boeing 737 versus an Airbus A320.
Right.
It even details the nuanced differences between individual aircraft of the exact same type within the airline's fleet.
Wait, I want to explore that. If 2 different airlines are flying the exact same model of aircraft, let's say they both buy brand new Airbus A320s, does that mean they might have completely different rules on how to fly them based on their individual Part B manual?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. The manufacturer, Airbus, establishes the absolute physical limits of the airframe, the maximum speeds, the structural stress points. Those are non-negotiable.
Right, physics.
And EASA establishes the baseline safety requirements. But within that framework, the airline's nominated post holders design the operational policy.
Give me an example.
Well, Airline X might write a Part B procedure requiring pilots to use a specific level of automatic braking on every single landing to reduce tire wear.
Oh, yeah?
But Airline Y might write their Part B to give the pilots full discretion over braking based on weather conditions. Both procedures are safe, both are approved by the authority, but they create completely different daily realities for the pilots.
That is fascinating. You could transfer from one airline to another, sit in the exact same cockpit, and have to completely relearn how to legally operate the machine.
Yep, it happens all the time.
That explains Part B. What about Part C and D?
Part C covers route and aerodrome. These are the specific, localized instructions for where the aircraft is actually going.
Oh, like maps and charts.
Right. It details the minimum safe flight levels over specific mountain ranges, the required communication frequencies, and the highly specific approach procedures for complex airports.
Makes sense.
Because flying into a massive flat hub like Heathrow requires entirely different procedural knowledge than navigating a steep valley approach into Innsbruck.
And Part D.
Part D is training. It outlines the exhaustive training syllabus, the simulator profiles, and the recurrent checking programs required for all operational personnel to maintain their licenses.
Managing a document of this magnitude must be a complete nightmare.
It's a full-time job for a lot of people.
I mean, aviation changes constantly. New software is installed, new routes are added, new safety bulletins are issued. How does a pilot keep track of what changed in a 3,000-page manual?
The sources actually highlight a fascinating low-tech solution to this high-tech problem.
Yo.
The manual is usually maintained and updated by the chief pilot. When an amendment is made, say, a slight change to an engine start checklist, the new text is marked with a simple vertical line in the margin of the page.
Just a vertical line.
Yes, it is a brilliant human factors design.
Oh, I see.
When a pilot opens a revised section of the manual, they do not have to mentally compare the new page against their memory of the old page. They simply scan the margin.
Right.
The vertical line instantly draws their eye to the exact procedure that has been altered, reducing cognitive load and ensuring that critical updates are never missed during pre-flight preparation.
That is so simple but so effective. So we have spent this entire time building this monolithic structure.
A massive structure.
We started with the global intent of ICAO. We narrowed into the legally enforceable European Constitution of EASA. We divided the regulator from the regulated.
Right.
We explored the flexibility of soft law. We defined the commercial threshold of the AOC, demanded hostage post holders to take liability, and wrote a multi-part operations manual tracked with vertical margin lines.
The entire system is engineered to predict and mitigate every conceivable failure before the aircraft ever leaves the ground.
But the atmosphere is chaotic. Unpredictable things happen at 30,000 feet.
They do.
What happens when the system encounters an emergency that no post holder ever imagined and no vertical line in the operations manual addresses? Who is actually in charge when the book fails?
This brings us back to the hook we started with and what is arguably the most profound concept in aviation law: the commander.
The commander.
The pilot in command, or PIC. At the very end of this massive bureaucratic funnel stands a single human being.
Regulation 1139-2018.
Yes, the regulation is unequivocal. It grants the pilot in command absolute, full authority to give commands and take any appropriate actions required to secure the safety of the aircraft, the passengers, and the crew.
But the law explicitly states they can break the rules, right?
It does. It legally codifies that in an emergency requiring an immediate decision, the commander can take any action they consider necessary to save the aircraft, even if that action involves a direct, intentional violation of local regulations, air traffic control procedures, or the airline's own operations manual.
Let's contextualize this. We just talked about Part C Cat Subpart C, which mathematically dictates minimum safe altitudes and performance.
Right.
If an aircraft suffers a catastrophic dual-engine failure over a populated area, and the only way to reach a runway is to glide below the legally mandated minimum safe altitude, the commander has the legal right to intentionally break that hard law.
Yes. They can and they must if it is the only way to save the aircraft.
Wow.
The regulator acknowledges a profound truth. You cannot legislate for every single variable in the physical world.
Yeah, nature always wins.
When multiple catastrophic failures compound, the rigid rules designed for standard operations might actually become a hazard. In that moment, EASA relinquishes control and relies entirely on the judgment, experience, and raw instinct of the human being in the left seat.
It is an incredible delegation of trust.
Right.
But surely they don't just let the pilot break the rules and walk away without a conversation.
No, the accountability is immediate.
Okay, good.
The regulation stipulates that if the commander exercises this ultimate authority and breaks a rule, they must notify the local aviation authority without delay, specifically within 10 days. They must file a detailed report explaining exactly why the emergency required a deviation from the law.
Dear EASA, I intentionally violated Part C Cat Subpart C because the aircraft was falling out of the sky. Here is the telemetry.
Exactly.
The ultimate authority in the air tethered to ultimate accountability on the ground. And the sources note this authority extends to the cabin as well.
It does. The commander has total passenger control.
Really?
Yeah, under the regulations, the PIC possesses the legal right to disembark any person who represents a potential hazard to the safety of the flight.
Okay, like who?
Whether as a passenger heavily intoxicated, someone displaying unruly behavior, or a deportee actively resisting transport and presenting a security risk. The commander's assessment of the risk is final. They can simply refuse to take the hazard into the sky.
Though, while the commander has absolute power over the passengers in the aircraft, the sources do point out that the passengers have significant legal power over the airline on the ground.
You are referring to European Regulation 261/2004.
Yes, exactly.
This is the massive consumer protection counterbalance. While the pilot protects physical safety, EC 261 protects the passenger's time and financial investment.
Right.
If an airline experiences severe delays, cancels a flight, or denies boarding due to commercial overbooking, they face strict legal consequences.
It forces the airline to offer compensation, rerouting, or full reimbursement. It prevents airlines from treating passengers merely as cargo when the schedule falls apart.
Exactly. It forces accountability. And speaking of accountability, how does the regulator actually know an airline is complying with all these rules on a daily basis? I mean, EASA inspectors aren't sitting in every single cockpit.
No, they aren't. The sources say it comes down to a staggering amount of paperwork, record keeping, and documentation.
The administrative burden is just immense. To prove compliance, an aircraft must physically carry a specific library of original documents on every single flight.
Like what?
This includes the certificate of airworthiness, the aircraft registration, the radio station license, a certified true copy of the AOC, and the journey log.
The notes also specifically mention the noise certificate and point out an interesting detail. If the certificate isn't in English, an English translation must be carried.
Yeah, and that goes back to the SAFA ramp inspections we discussed earlier.
All right.
English is the international language of aviation. If a French inspector boards a German aircraft, they must be able to instantly verify the documentation.
Makes total sense.
But the onboard documents are really just the tip of the iceberg. Back at the airline's headquarters, the retention rules are incredibly strict.
How far back does the paper trail go?
Journey logs and operational flight plans. So the exact route, fuel burn, and weather data for a specific flight must be kept for 3 months.
Okay.
But when it comes to the human element, the scrutiny intensifies. Flight crew records, tracking every hour a pilot flew, every mandatory rest period they took, and the results of every simulator check they underwent must be retained for anywhere from 15 months to 3 years.
So if a pilot makes a mistake today, the authority can walk into the airline's office tomorrow and pull the records to see exactly how many hours that pilot slept a year and a half ago and whether the crew training post holder signed off on their last simulator session.
Yep.
The web of accountability is completely inescapable.
It is inescapable, and it becomes even more complex when airlines try to expand their fleets quickly.
Oh.
Yeah, the sources detail the regulatory mechanisms of leasing. Airlines rarely own all their aircraft outright, and they often need temporary capacity. The notes distinguish between two primary methods, dry leasing and wet leasing.
Let's break down the mechanics of these because they sound like simple financial transactions, but I suspect they are regulatory minefields. What is a dry lease?
A dry lease is a purely mechanical transaction. An airline leases the physical aircraft, just the metal, from a lessor. The aircraft operates entirely under the air operator certificate of the airline that borrowed it. They staff it with their own pilots, they maintain it according to their own Part M maintenance schedule, and they fly it using their own Part B operations manual.
So a dry lease is essentially renting a car.
Mm-hmm.
You get the keys, but you are the one driving, and you are bound by your own license and rules.
Great analogy.
What is a wet lease?
A wet lease is when an airline leases the aircraft and the fully trained crew to operate it.
Oh, fine.
In this scenario, the aircraft remains under the air operator certificate of the company providing the plane.
So using the car analogy again, a wet lease is like hiring a taxi. You get the vehicle, but someone else is driving it under their own corporate license. Why would an airline do this?
Usually to cover short-term capacity crunches. If an airline has 3 aircraft grounded for heavy maintenance during the busy summer season, they might wet lease a fully crewed aircraft from another company to fly their scheduled routes.
Right,
But regulators watch wet leasing aggressively.
because it blurs the lines of accountability.
Exactly. If a French airline wet leases a plane from an operator in a different country, whose operations manual are the pilots following? Whose oversight applies?
That gets messy fast.
It does. EASA requires intense prior notification and safety auditing to ensure an airline doesn't bypass stringent European safety standards by wet leasing an aircraft from a substandard operator.
This intense oversight really crystallizes when we look at the final operational scenario mentioned in our sources. They specifically highlight operations over the North Atlantic.
Ah, the North Atlantic tracks. This is a brilliant real-world synthesis of everything we have discussed today.
Really?
Yeah, it is where the AOC, the operations manual, and CEPTA-specific approvals all converge.
The sources mention specific routes, like Tango 9, Tango 16, Tango 213. Why is this specific patch of ocean so heavily regulated?
Because when you fly across the Atlantic, you fly beyond the reach of standard air traffic control radar.
Oh,
Controllers literally cannot see the aircraft. To prevent mid-air collisions in this massive void, the airspace is strictly controlled via high-level airspace, or HLA rules.
so you can't just point your nose toward New York and fly whatever route you want.
Not if you want to fly in the efficient altitudes. The notes point out that a route like Tango 9 is heavily trafficked by holiday flights between Northern Europe and the Canaries.
Okay.
To legally operate a passenger jet down one of these oceanic routes above flight level 285, an airline must satisfy incredible technical requirements.
What kind of equipment is mandated?
Standard VHF communication radios operate on line of sight. They cannot reach across the curvature of the Earth over the ocean.
So you're just out of range.
Exactly. So the regulations demand the aircraft be equipped with HF radios, high-frequency systems that actually bounce signals off the ionosphere to communicate with controllers halfway across the world.
Wow.
Furthermore, the aircraft must be equipped with redundant long-range navigation systems, or LRNS.
And I assume simply having the equipment isn't enough.
It is not. The airline must apply for the specific approval, the SPA, for HLA operations.
Right, tying back to Annex V.
Exactly. The nominated post holders must write specific procedures for oceanic contingencies into Part C of the operations manual.
Okay.
The crew must be specifically trained in Part D on how to request an oceanic clearance from controllers in Shanwick or Santa Maria at least 30 minutes before entering the boundary. Only when all of those regulatory boxes are checked is the aircraft allowed into the track system.
It is staggering. We have peeled back the physical engineering of the airplane to reveal the invisible architecture holding it up.
It's quite a view.
We started with the global ambitions of ICAO and the Chicago Convention, and we zoomed right into the precise, legally enforceable European Constitution of EASA's 5 annexes.
We examined the necessary firewall between the regulators in Part ARO and the corporate operators in Part R.
Right.
We saw how soft law acceptable means of compliance provide the vital flexibility needed to keep pace with innovation without sacrificing the absolute safety of hard law.
We navigated the legal tripwire of valuable consideration and the grueling, heavily audited process of obtaining the air operator certificate.
The golden ticket.
Exactly. We saw how the nominated post holders translate vast legislation into the practical day-to-day reality of the operations manual.
And finally, we ended in the cockpit where all of this bureaucracy just funnels down to a single commander.
The PIC.
A pilot who follows the rules meticulously, but possesses the ultimate legal authority under Regulation 11392018 to completely ignore them if the survival of the aircraft depends on human instinct.
It is a remarkable balance, crushing regulation designed to prevent every conceivable failure, paired with the ultimate freedom to act when the inconceivable happens.
It's beautifully designed.
But as we look at this system, a system built entirely around human accountability, human post holders, and human pilot instinct, it raises a massive question about the future.
It really does. We are standing on the edge of a new era in aviation. Manufacturers are aggressively developing highly autonomous aircraft and AI-assisted flight decks. We have spent an hour dissecting how EASA regulates human beings.
Right, the human element.
The requirement for a human accountable manager. The interview for a human crew training post holder. The 10-day report required when a human commander breaks a rule.
Yeah.
As the software takes on more of the flying and decision-making, how does this regulatory architecture adapt?
That's the million-dollar question. When the ultimate authority to deviate from the rules to save the plane belongs to an algorithm, who goes to the National Aviation Authority for the mandatory interview?
Exactly.
Who holds the legal liability when the code fails?
The invisible web is going to have to be completely rewoven.
That is something to think about the next time you step onto a plane. Look out the window at the incredible physical engineering, the metal, and the fuel. But remember the invisible web keeping you safe.
It's always there.
Look at your boarding pass not just as a ticket to a destination, but as a legally binding multi-million-page contract, backed by an invisible life-saving architecture that spans the globe. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you on the next one.